So, all right. So, thanks to everybody for coming. We have Bryce Pereira. He's a great dude, and I think this will be fun for us to meet with him today, and then just kind of hear his insights on his journey of tennis, and also, transitioning from being a top level player, junior player, to now coaching at USC, and being also an interim too, while he was at UCLA, being a captain there. So I think he will have a lot to share. Um, so let's see. The way that we're gonna do this is we'll keep the interview like the first 30 minutes or so with Bryce. And then after that, we're gonna open it up to Q&A. So if you guys want to ask questions, start typing it in the chat box, and then we're just gonna go through them as much as we can. And keep it pretty informal, casual, and keep it fun. So with that said, Bryce, it's great to have you, and we're here to pull back the curtain on what it really takes to compete at a high level in junior tennis. And I think many of our juniors players will have interacted with older coaches or older, but it'll be kind of really good to get a perspective from you who have played at such high level only what 2 3 years ago at UCLA, and now on the coaching side. So yeah, if you can fill us in on your just the journey, that will be great.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you guys and share my journey through tennis and everything. I'll try to keep they give you like the Spark Note version of my journey because I don't want to kind of ramble on for too long. But yeah, I mean, tennis for me was it was kind of like I was born into it a little bit. Just I say that just because literally when I was born in the hospital, my dad put a tennis ball in my hand as the first thing for me to hold. So it wasn't like I do love the sport a ton, but I guess it wasn't my choice for me personally. But I'm very grateful for the sport. I love it so much. So I'm very grateful that my dad, decided to do that for me. My dad played Davis Cup for Singapore, so that's how he was always into tennis and stuff, and it brought him over here to the States. And he's a coach right now. So
And
he
you
was
have a sister who played at TCU too,
yeah, my
right?
sister played at TCU. She played 4 years there, and she stayed in Dallas to work, not in tennis anymore. She didn't love the sport as much as I did. She was arguably probably better, had a better junior career than I did for a long time. I mean, she's gotten as high as one in the country or two in the country. So we're a tennis family. My mom doesn't play, but she could probably coach better than better than a lot of coaches that I know, and she knows the sport. Like, I mean, she watches more tennis than me, myself, my dad, my sister all combined. I mean, she loves the sport. So, but
It's
yeah, I mean,
great.
going through the junior circuit is not an easy task, especially at a young age. I was taught at a very young age. So I started competing when I was 6. And that was when I played my first tournament. That's the youngest age that we were allowed to start competing in my section and stuff. I think that's just like a standard thing, I think now. I think to be in the 6 years old to be competing in the eight and under division. But yeah, I mean, my dad always from the start of from my earliest memory was, shadowing forehands with me and, talking to me about the game and stuff. And it was really like it was really a way for us to kind of connect, for father-son relationship. Because it's a sport that he's so fortunate and he loves so much and he wanted to share it with me. So at 6 years old, I was actually doing decent enough for a 6 year old, and my sister is 3 years older than me. So she was actually picked up by the USA Training Center out here in Carson, California. So they had a major USA Training Center out there, and they were, huge on player development from a young age, and they made this huge push to find these, the next great American, and that was always the goal for them to find. So I was selected as 6 years old to be a part of this program. And that's kind of like the early foundation, of my mentality and my, how I see the game and everything alongside with my dad's stuff that he always talked to me about. But yeah, I mean, being at that training center at such a young age, I mean, I don't remember a ton. The one thing I do remember the most, and I was there from age 6 to 12. The one thing I remember the most is that they really instilled like maturity and it didn't matter that I was 6 years old. Is like they were going to talk to me as if I was, still 18 or, a professional tennis player. That's the way they went about their development there and stuff. And I think at a young age, it was a little more difficult for me to, wrap my mind around those things because I mean, my parents did a great job of kind of helping me, mature and stuff. They were very tough on me at a young age when it came to tennis. But they always told me like my dad's whole mindset is, tennis is a sport that is a lifetime sport. It teaches you lessons not on the court but off the court. So, if I forgot to take out the trash one day, my dad's like, it's just like your forehand, like you're getting lazy with things, getting lazy with your feet to the ball. Like he's like your mind's slipping. So it was
Yeah.
always like my dad always tied everything in my life back to tennis, and that's how
Did
it
you
was.
find that helpful or
I think
overbearing?
at a young age, it felt a lot more overbearing for sure.
Yeah.
I just looking back at it, I'm very fortunate with everything that I've been through and experienced. And I think that, obviously I would not be anywhere close to where I am today, or the person I am without all the experiences and that those tough days on the court and stuff and after losses. But yeah, I mean, at that training center, I was one of the youngest kids there and I was doing pretty good. They really wanted me to play up. So I was always at the top of the division, in my section and pretty highly ranked in the nation, always top 10, each year and stuff. And but my parents always told me like this is a full-time job. And at a young age, you're just like, oh yeah, yeah, it is. And you don't really like notice, you don't really like think about it like that right away. But the more like by the age of 9 and 10, I was already traveling by myself and staying with host families, in different states to train and play all these different events and stuff. So I really, really matured, I feel like at a very young age. And and I think that was what kind of helped me mentally a little bit more and with my game and taking ownership of, everything in my game, whether it was the tennis part, the preparation, they really at the player development center, they really wanted you to take ownership. And that was the thing. So my
Oh,
mom was like, she loved us so much. She would always like pack my coolers, make sure my bag was all packed, my tennis bag and everything. And the coaches knew once they found out that my mom was doing that, they were like, just no more. Like let him do it. Like if he forgets his drinks, if he forgets his, food or whatever, it's on him. And I think that was really hard for my mom, I think at the beginning, because she wanted me, to guide me, obviously, but also she didn't maybe necessarily agree with maybe treating a kid like that at a young age. Because it was also
mm,
like very like, discipline was everything, maturity was everything, and like we competed on everything. And it was one of
yeah.
those, it was almost like if you messed up, you were running or you were, punishment is like a tough way to look at it, but it was pretty much that. Like if you messed up on a drill, if you lost a match, like you were running, if you lost a baseline game, you were running. Like it was a lot like that. So at a young age, the competitiveness was like you had to be, it was almost a little more cutthroat in a way from the coaches because they were very tough on us. Um,
Okay.
and
What?
oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead.
As I got older, they started giving me a little more freedom with kind of like what I wanted to do and stuff. Older meaning like 11, 10. So I remember sitting, I don't know if you guys heard of the coach David Roditi. He's the head coach at TCU, but he was the
Yeah.
head coach of the player development and he was my main coach at the USDA training center. So he sat me down, I remember, and he told me he was like, just me here. He talked to my parents. My parents said it's completely up to Bryce on this decision. But he sat down with me, we had lunch, and I'm 10 years old, and he's like, you have a choice right now. He goes, you're doing really well. And he's like, I see a lot of potential in you. He said, you can, if you choose to, you can homeschool and I'll train you with everything. I'll make sure your grades are passing. Like, he's like, I'm not going to let you, not do school or anything. Like, he's like, I'm going to make sure you're on top of your studies with everything. He's like, I'll watch your diet, your fitness, your training regimen, everything. But it has to come from you. You have to want to do this. And I'm like 10 years old. Like, I was just like, okay, I'll do it. And unfortunately, I was never able to actually fully. And this was a homeschool program, so there's only like 8 kids, maybe 10 kids in this program, and it was the kind of the last like I guess they took usually the top kids of the groups and they all put them into this program, the homeschool program, and you get there at 8 a.m. and you're there until pretty much 3, 4 p.m. every single day. Um, and before I could actually start that program with that coach with Roditi exclusively, he got the position at TCU. So he was I never got to I worked with him for 3 years at the USA Training Center, but I was never able to work with him full time when it came to my homeschooling and stuff. So I got transferred over to a different coach and stuff and went through that. But I think with that coach that was there specifically, he really the way he approached coaching us, I don't think was the right way. And he was way too tough on the young guys at a young age of like punishing us with everything and making us run. I mean, I was all I could remember being there was just running. Like for every little thing that I
Mhm.
messed up on, if I wasn't working hard, I was running. If I wasn't doing this, I was running. If I wasn't winning, I was running, you know? So I think that during those years, it was really tough. You know, I was there for 2, 3 years after that with him. And I think that was a really, tough time mentally at a young age for me to get through it. And I really didn't enjoy tennis at all during that time. It felt like it was like it just the kind of the worst part of my day, every time like being out there.
So
Yeah.
still, how old were you during this time?
This was
10
between
to
like
when?
this was like 10 to like 13, like around
Got
that
it.
time.
Yeah.
And eventually they decided to actually release all of there was only three guys that they were focused on, and there was three of us there. And they kept making us like play up. Like I think I was top 10 in the country for my division, like my actual division, but they kept giving me wild cards to go play in the higher divisions. So, and I couldn't win. Like I like the maturity, the physical maturity of like for boys specifically, like from a 12-year-old to a 14-year-old is a huge jump. And then 14 to 16 is even bigger. And it's just like those jumps physically were too tough at the time for me because I was a small kid. I was a late bloomer when it came to growing. And yeah, it was tough. I mean, I vividly remember going to play Easter Bowl in Palm Springs, and I wanted to go to Florida and Delray to go play the 12s division, and I was going to be a top one of the top four seeds at that one. And they gave me a wild card into the 14s, which was in Palm Springs, and they took us out for a week before the tournament to Jose Higueras' ranch. And Jose Higueras, it was one of Roger Federer's like coaches on tour, and he was like the main like overseer like of my game and stuff alongside the coaches, but he was like the main person that gave the check to the coaches of like how I was doing and stuff. So we got a good training. That was a great experience to train with him and alongside like right with him on the court with him for that week and stuff. So I was pretty pumped going into that week, and I just got absolutely demolished by like the 14-year-olds. I think I was only 11 or 12 at the time, and stuff. And I remember it was a compass draw. I don't know, do they still have compass draws? Like, is that still a thing? Like in
Mhm.
tournament?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in
Like a
a
lot of the L ones have a compass draw where,
okay.
for the 12 and under, you
Yeah.
can actually lose 4 times in a row and you're
Yeah.
you're still in the draw, right? But at a higher age group, I think it's a little bit more limited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had the compass draw. I lost all four matches, and I barely won
Hmm.
like games. Like it was like I remember I lost 0-1. I lost like 2-1. I lost like 3-1. It was like bad. And then I lost first round doubles too. And I remember like being there, and like it was just like it was terrible staying with the coaches and the team and stuff, like because you just felt embarrassed, like that like they put all this funding that you felt like into you, and like you weren't producing anything. But at the same time, I was mad that I couldn't, play in my own division. I was forced to play up.
What
Um,
was their like reaction to you after the tournament?
they were just angry, they were angry at
Mm.
me. Well, I think they was more angry at my actual coach at the time who was like working with me. I talked to him later on, and he told me that he was getting a lot of heat for my results. And he said it wasn't against like me or anything. He just felt like he didn't fully agree maybe with how the things were running, but he had to do it because his boss was telling him how to do it. And there it was very cutthroat also for the coaches as well. And I never saw it that way. I just felt like it was always like directed at the players. But I think it came from like the higher ups getting mad at the coaches who were working with the players, and it trickled down to the players a lot. So I just remember that during that time, like just getting yelled at like a lot of running, obviously, and it was more just like you got to be better. It was very result oriented,
Gotcha.
and at a young age, I just don't agree with it being like that.
How did your parents handle this, like seeing you losing,
They were tough.
handedly?
They were tough on me. They were the way my parents are. It's always been tough love. That's just how I grew up and stuff. It's nothing against them or anything, but I mean, for them, it was always just like, pick yourself up and you keep moving forward. That was always from them. My dad understood it a little more because, going through the Davis Cup system at Singapore and stuff, he knows the pressures, and he was a lot more like lenient, I guess, or understanding, of what I was going through. My mom she wouldn't play sports or anything, but she obviously loves tennis, but she was probably the toughest one on me
Mm.
growing up. But yeah, I mean, after I was released, they cut all the boys from the program. So they released all the boys from the program, and they only wanted to focus on the girls side of things.
Mm.
Uh, so during
Well,
that time, I was still homeschooled, but I started working full time with my dad, and that's when my tennis really took off because no one knows my game better than my dad. So being with him and stuff, I got to work with him every single day, 2 sessions a day, and I was homeschooled and stuff. And during that time, I started to find the that love again for tennis.
this was when you're like 14
Yeah,
plus.
this is like, yeah, 14 and stuff. I had a little bit of a back injury during that time, so I was set back for like a little over a year, and then I kind of worked my way back, and that was kind of the time for me to start doing better too, because as you get to a junior year in high school, that's when college coaches can start looking at you.
Mm.
Uh, so during that time, it was very stressful. I don't think I handled the pressure insanely well when it came to the beginning of things with like college coaches, because when it comes to college coaching, a lot of college coaches they look at you and they obviously like the tennis aspect and like how you do well in singles, but they also look at your doubles really like pretty heavily too. So I was
Is
doing
that so
well.
right now as well?
Yeah, we always like to. I mean, it's not like a deal breaker if you can't play doubles, but it's like icing on the cake if you're a very good doubles player as well. And I was fortunate enough to do really well in doubles during that time. I won 4 gold balls in doubles. I won KZoo, Easter Bowl twice, and then Winter Nationals. So I won those 4 in doubles. Had some good partners during that time, and yeah, and I was doing really well in doubles, and singles was pretty solid too. So then I got like that first day of getting recruited. It was pretty overwhelming. Just a lot of calls and stuff. So and then when they would come and watch me, I had in the beginning it was hard for me to stay focused on myself and my game because I was too busy of like trying to be perfect out there of with my game and stuff and when the college coaches were there watching. So there was like times I remember being junior sectionals at Los Cab and I go up and play a kid who had committed to Illinois already. So I knew the coaches weren't there watching him. And he was like a top 5 seed. He was older than me. And there's like a deck like above the courts. And I'll never forget like walking out because the deck, you can't see the deck when you're walking out to the courts. So then like who's up there? And I remember walking to the court and I put my bag down. I look up and there's like 30 coaches up there, like all on the railing. And I'm like, oh God. Like I already remember like hitting that first ball in warm up. I'm like, my arm is like, it is like so
Heavy
tense. Like I have so
lead.
many nerves. My legs feel wobbly. Like you feel like you're gonna throw up almost. And like I'm like, I don't know what to do. My mind is racing. I go down 0-5 in like 10 minutes. Like it was like so quick, I remember. And I'm like, God, this is so bad. None of them are leaving either. I'm like, because I kind of wanted them to leave. So I was like, loosen up. But none of them left. But I ended up loosening up a little bit. I remember winning like one game in that first set. And then I think I ended up losing in 3, like a close 3-setter. But I remember just like the nerves at that time, like it was a lot for me to manage. Yeah.
Yeah, they probably wanted to see how you respond as well, right?
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
so what? Yeah, this is a perfect like a segue too. Like, what do you think separates like the top level junior players? Obviously, like I see, these kids like train day in, day out. I mean, they're juggling schoolwork,
Yeah.
fitness, and now things are becoming much more physical too. So then if you're not keeping up with your physical shape and some of these tournaments, sometimes you're playing like 3 matches a day sometime. And so if you're not physically fit too, and it's just like very competitive, right? So in your own experience too, like what separates those like best juniors to people who are good?
It's like I see it clearer now, being on the recruiting side of things and being a college coach of, seeing the game for so many years now. But to me, I feel like what separates these kids is a little bit how they kind of approach the game. It's more than just hitting, cross court and down the line. I mean, you can see these kids really in the way that they strategically, pick apart other people's games. They're really it's like a chess match. They're always looking for that opening. And I think that the kids that, do the best is the kids that are really, really strategically thinking about why are they actually hitting the shot they're hitting. They're not just hitting across to hit across, and you can see that. And then it's like kind of like layers to it. I feel like that mentality you can see it because sometimes it's not refined, but you can see what they're trying to do. And then from there, I feel like then it goes down to like a foundational standpoint. I think with their footwork and the kind of their core of like how they kind of move around the court and stuff. So it's like when you put those two together, immediately as a coach, you can see right away, oh, that kid's got, he's got game, he's got something. Um, and it's not like it doesn't have to be perfect for in the eyes of college coaches. Like it could be like glimpses of it, and you're like, okay, he kind of gets it of like where he's going and what he's trying to approach in the game and stuff. And you're like, okay, I can work with that, you know. And it's not like if the kid doesn't have it, the kid's not gonna get it. Like we've had kids that have come through our program and their tennis IQ is not the highest. And it's not like it has to be, but you can see like their willingness on the court to like learn and problem solve is at a really high level. And for them, like another layer to it is like the emotional aspect. Like when kids get too emotional on court when it comes to like losing and stuff, it's like it's something that is very controllable, at the same time. So we kind of like to see that like if we see a kid that's just like way too out there when it comes to those things and maybe like getting into it or the refs and stuff, that shies us away a little bit. Because it only amplifies in college, having to deal with the emotions. I mean, you have to deal with so much already. So as like college coaches right now, we really, emphasize, especially on my side of when I talk to my guys, like controlling the controllables. So it's like, you know, fitness, emotions, shot selection, like those things. I always emphasize to the guys, like you control those things as best as you can and let everything else, the winning and losing, how your opponent reacts, the weather, all that stuff, let all that stuff play out how it does. But if you can control your controllables, you're usually in a great position to, play whatever style of tennis that you love to play. Yeah.
Makes sense. What from a parent standpoint, how do we support the kids in terms of, day in, day out?
It's a it's a tough. I mean, I'm not there yet. Everyone asks me like, if you have a kid, like, are you gonna teach him tennis? And I just keep saying I don't know. Like, because it's tough to be in that seat, to watch your kid out there and stuff. And I really truly, understand it now a lot more. Like being on this side, I was able to work with a young junior. He was my first student ever. It was while I was in college. I worked with him. A great kid from my area. He's going to college to a D3 school in the fall for tennis. But like that was the first time, I was able to like travel with this kid, work with this kid and stuff, and being in that almost like parent, seat and having to witness all this. And I was like, oh, I get it now. Why these parents sometimes get angry and like all this stuff. But I think that there's a fine line that parents have to walk, which is tough. Of like you have to take the emotional side out of it a little bit in a way of like the winning and losing, because the winning and losing will weigh on the kid too much already enough that when you can really feel it from the parents, I would really feel it from my mom and stuff. Like it can distract you a little bit and kind of throw you off and maybe let you take your focus away from the tennis and more of like I'm trying to please my parent and stuff like that. So I feel like you have to find that like there's no right answer, but
Right.
I think there's a recipe that you can kind of follow of like being supportive, but you also have to know when to like you can't give them too much freedom in a sense. So we always talk about keeping them on like a tighter leash a little bit. It's like because if you give them too much freedom and tell them everything's okay, then when things aren't going wrong, all they can say is it's just okay, it just happens, and then the problem solving kind of goes out the door. So I think that the way I've seen it is like be tough on the kid, as supportive as you can for the kid, and especially at a young age. I think as you get older, you can kind of start to put the emotional side back into it. But at a young age, like it's all about, just being supportive and allowing the kid to and letting them know that everything's okay. Meaning like if you feel nervous, if you feel, angry after a match at a young age, like tell them like right away, like it's okay, but like try to help them problem solve through it. I feel like my parents at a young age were like very tough on, me when it came to that. I vividly remember getting second place in a singles tournament and my dad broke the trophy, after the match. But he didn't break
Wow.
it more of like because of the loss, which I didn't realize in the beginning. It was more of how I acted on the court, because there's a certain way you got to uphold yourself on the tennis court. And I truly believe that. And I was not following that at a young age. And that was more what he was mad at. But yeah, I mean, it's a slippery slope for the parents because you want to be so involved too at the same time, but you also have to let him be free, but then you can't let him be too free because then you can lose him, right? And he won't, find himself a little bit or be like disciplined with things. So it's a very, give and take position that you're in.
Yeah, also with the parents too, you have different type of knowledge, right? Like your parents, like your dad, who's very knowledgeable, whereas your mom didn't play tennis. So then I think the roles are going to be different too. But stepping back to the junior player side, what would you tell them that you didn't, you know, you now know that you wish you had known when you're earlier? Be it dealing with the mental side, tournament side, dealing with parents, dealing with coaches.
I think that, the biggest thing for me, if I look back at it and want to change something with my junior career and how I kind of held myself on the court was I was too tough on myself. And I wanted to win so badly that like my sister actually she and I had a great conversation about this a little while ago, about perfection versus excellence. And if you're chasing perfection in tennis, it's a lost cause kind of. It's a dead end because you're never gonna find it. There's no such thing as being perfect. Um, but at a young age, you don't realize that because all you want to do is you see these pros on the court and they seem everything's perfect. But as you get older, you start to realize they're not as perfect as you think in the sense of like they may show it, they don't feel it, you know? And I think that if I could talk to myself at a young age, I would tell myself, like, and we tell our guys this too on the court, like, your level is your level that day. That's just how the sport is. Like, tennis is a very, very tough, brutal sport to play. It's also the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest sport to play because it teaches you everything. But it's a lot of like, you can't go out and play the same level every single day.
Right.
But your goal is to focus on trying to make that discrepancy between your best tennis and your worst tennis as small as possible. And to me, I never saw it that way at a young age. I wanted to always be right here, just perfect. And if I was just under it, I would not, it wasn't good enough for me. And that really ate away at me on the court of like problem solving and trying to figure out, the competitive side of things in tennis. Because there's so many more factors that you can focus on the court that don't involve your level. That can take your focus away from how bad you're playing and still get you to win the match. So I think that, a lot of junior players, they chase feeling the ball, feeling perfect on timing, feeling perfect on footwork. When in that case, in my opinion, it's not at all. Like you got to chase, how can you be excellent that day? And how can you, whatever cards you're dealt with that day, how can you problem solve on that day to try to win and put yourself in the best position to do well. And that's when players can do that, I feel like they develop at a very, very quick rate.
Yeah, I heard Agassi said like, it's rarely that they feel perfect on the court, right? There's always something wrong every day, and
Yeah.
it's just dealing with what you got that day.
Exactly. And we talk, I
Yeah.
mean, we deal with this at the highest level. I mean, the other coach that's at USC, Mark Lucero, he's the associate head coach. I mean, he says it perfectly. He's like, I've worked with guys in the top 20 ATP, and he's like, it's the same stuff every single day that you deal with at, high school level, at a junior level, at the early levels of tennis. It's the exact same thing. It just seems like it's just spun a different way. And I think that like, and we tell our guys this throughout the entire year this year for several matches, like guys like not playing well that day, they just kind of like phone it in and be like, hey, it's not my day. When in fact, like maybe it's not your day tennis wise, but this is how tennis is. But how can you problem solve on that day? And once our team kind of started to do that a little more, that's when we started having better results throughout the year.
So they still at that level. I mean,
Yep.
USC is like really high level. They still deal with that.
100% every single day.
Yeah.
I mean, our number one player is he beat Musetti coming into college. Like he was a top junior and stuff. And I always tell him he just graduated, and I always tell him you forget on the court how good of a player you actually are, because he just like for him like he's played at such a high level for so long. He's like he's kind of like numb to it a little bit. But he was a kind of a guy that was the first I had him for 3 years. So I started when he was a sophomore, and mentally on the court, he was one of the weaker ones on the team. Tennis wise, he was arguably the best in the team, talent wise. And his
When
mental
did
side,
he beat Musetti?
he beat Musetti when he
Um,
was 15, when they were both juniors. Right before it was
oh,
before Musetti was really Musetti, but Musetti was also one of the world juniors. So I
yeah.
mean, he beat him in 3 sets at Roland Garros, and at the
How
juniors.
long ago was that?
That was 2021 maybe, right around there.
Okay, so only
2020.
four
Yeah,
years ago.
yeah, 4 years
Yeah.
ago. Uh,
Musetti just went to what is that?
quarters or semis?
Semifinal.
Yeah, semis of Roland Garros. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Peter, played 4 years in college, and he would ask Mark, am I playing at a what level do you think I'm playing at? Mark's like, dude, you're playing at a top 100 ACB level for sure. But your mental side is what, kind of drags you down. And on the court, like if you had even in practice, you had a bad day in practice, you just phone it in and kind of just concede to having a bad day. And then not only that, I mean, as all these juniors on this call know, like if your practice partner's having a bad day of practice, you're probably having a bad day of practice too, because it's a two-way street when it comes to tennis practice. And this year was the first year where I would pull him aside and be like, and Pete was like, one of those days, oh, it's hot, I'm tired, I've been studying. And I was like, Pete, these are the days that you grow the most. This is where you really, really make the largest strides in your development, not from a tennis aspect, but from a mental aspect. Because tennis wise, you're like, not saying you're capped out, but like the increments you're gonna move are so small in your tennis game that you just gotta keep chipping away every day at that. But this is where you can make a pretty massive jump mentally if you can kind of, figure this out. And that was the first time this year that where Pete in the fall was like, you know what, like he kind of nodded at me. He's like, yeah, you're right, and he accepted that. And those days he had his best practices. And the guy went on to be 16 in the country. He ended like 16 or 17 in the country. He's an All-American, and he qualified for the accelerator program through college. So he gets like 10 or 15 wild cards into some challengers and higher futures and stuff. So and he had the best tennis of his life this year. So, and all it was a mental change. And it was so small of like accepting that he feels terrible that day. And he told himself, he's like, I'm going to not let that terrible feeling dictate this practice. I'm going to see if I can problem solve out of this. And that's exactly what he did.
And that's like something that you can actually do at any given time, right?
Absolutely. It's just
Yeah.
embracing that feeling of like feeling pretty bad that day and whatever you're feeling, accepting it, and then being like, okay, how can I move forward and put my best foot forward on this day? How can I get better?
Yeah. So how do you advise players to train smarter, not just harder? So like any tips on how to structure it, right? How much fitness should they do, right? Like at USC, do you guys do fitness daily?
Yeah.
And
Um,
is it
yeah, it's so pretty much our training regimen, the way it works is like so our season's split up. I mean, it's like a pretty much a full year season, but it's kind of in phases. So that fall season's kind of where you get most of the work done of like really breaking your body down to build it back up. So
Mhm.
usually like especially as like a freshman coming in, like that first fall is pretty tough because you're not used to the load, the management. You're not used to all the fitness. You're not used to all the hitting that many tennis balls. You're not used to doing it all and going to college classes. Like it's a lot. But that's when we really kind of hit the gym hard. So we get in there usually 3 times a week, with a full lift. And then I'm huge on conditioning. To me, like you don't need to be like buff to play tennis, but if you're super incredibly fast and or build up your speed and you can build up your endurance, like to me, you can win a lot of matches. And then the strength just comes. Like as you get older and you start to kind of stop growing and everything, I think that that's the time that you should really, really hit the gym more of like, but not like you're not like benching like crazy weights and like high weights. Like you're just staying like mid-level weights for reps to keep your tone, and that's to me like that's how I see when I was my fittest and playing my best, that's what I was doing. So I think that at a young age, like for the juniors, like don't focus too much right now on like getting super insanely buff or anything. Like do body weight stuff, do band resisted things, like because you're still growing. If your plates are still open, like allow yourself to still grow and get used to your body and stuff. But condition as much as you can, where it comes to lateral movement, getting in and out of corners, like the guys that can get in and out of corners better are the guys that, they can recover faster and turn defense to offense. And stuff and take pride in that and like fast twitch things and like you don't need to go on long runs, like you can go on a long run every once in a while if you need it. Like I enjoy my long runs and stuff, but like get those fast twitch muscles and those short bursts going because you really only take 2 to 3 hard first steps on the tennis court but before you have to decelerate. So And I think I saw an interview, I forgot who it was from the NFL. I don't follow the NFL too much, but I remember seeing it on Twitter. And they were talking about his speed, on the field and stuff. And he's like, the attention to detail that he put into his ankles, ankle mobility and everything, he said is what got him to understand how the body should move and how he should, go about moving on the on the field. And it's funny enough, like that, my going into my last season at UCLA, I did a 10-week training block with my trainer at UCLA. And my goal was I was the fastest in the team in every drill we did. I took pride in the gym when it came to speed and stuff and change of direction. I was the fastest on the team. And I told him, I said, I want to maintain being the fastest, but I want 10 pounds of muscle. So I want to be 10 pounds of muscle, but I want to maintain my speed. I was like, is that even possible? He goes, I don't know if it's possible. He's like, but I'm going to train you as much as I can to do it. So every day it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, Thursday, Friday was for 10 weeks. I did that. And during that same time, I was still playing in a bunch of, the Pro Series UTR events that were going on in Newport and stuff. And I didn't want to stop the tennis. I wanted to really test myself. That was when I felt the best on court. Is I didn't end up getting 10 pounds. I got about 5 or 6 pounds, but I got even faster. And he really, really focused on, the attention to detail on my ankles. And I was able to, pistol squat, body weight. My hamstrings got super strong. Those like big muscles in your legs, your hips, your quads got strong. And that was the best season I had at UCLA. And fitness wise, like I never got even close to tapping out in a match because of fitness. So that to me, like hitting those aspects and the conditioning was what really killed me. Like that was what like he killed me every day on was lift and condition. But the conditioning was the deal breaker was that got me to where I was.
How would you say that the time you spent practicing, like tennis practice, with actual tennis racket ball versus like fitness, like what would you say the ratio was? And what
Uh,
would you say the ratio should be for your players?
if you have time where you can take time off and you're not playing too many events, like, and you're not gonna, let's say you're busy with school, like high school or junior high, whatever grade you guys are in, and you need to kind of hunker down on the academics and you don't have time to play tournaments. During that time, you can take the time to like kind of hammer in the fitness, and you don't need too much tennis. Because I've had some students that I was working with at a higher level, and they're like, oh, I played like, I was on court for 6 hours yesterday. I was like, you're on court for 6 hours, but what were you doing? And he explained to me, and I'm like, yeah, but the 6 hours you were kind of just going around hitting balls. It wasn't like an efficient, 6 hours. Like you could have done all that work in an hour. So that the quantity over quality, I feel like as a junior is a huge misconception because I feel like these guys will go out and they'll hit for like 3 hours, and you don't need to hit for 3 hours. If you go out there for an hour and you're very, very diligent with what you're working on and have a clear mind of what you want to work with your coach and stuff, I feel like that's way more beneficial than going. Even like to me, like I talked to Wayne Bryan, the Bryan brothers' dad, and he talked about like, and I truly agree with this, like watching tennis, if you're watching tennis in a manner that you're really kind of breaking down the game and you can watch it without just watching the ball go left and right, but you're actually kind of breaking down what they're doing, their patterns, and seeing how they develop points. Like to me, that's like he would always say, like that's better than a practice, because your mind's still working. And I and
Did you hear that, Rowan? I
and
tell him to watch like Pagula or some
yeah.
of these, like ladies, right? He's like,
Yeah.
oh no, I'm only watching the guys.
No, watch them all. Like try to see every perspective you can of the game and
Yeah.
stuff. And it really, really open your mind up to what's possible with this game. I mean, it's endless. And the great part about tennis too is like it's completely personal to what you want. Like if you see the game as being more aggressive and like hammering the ball down the guy's throat, like go and do that. If you see it as going back and grinding and turning into a match of fitness, like go do that. Like it's so personal and you can allow yourself to your creativeness to kind of show in your game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah. So what you kind of maybe this was your answer, but I wanted to ask you, what do most juniors think that they need more of that, but actually need less of,
Yeah, I think
in
it's just
opinion?
time. I think it's just time on court. I feel like the
Mm.
time on court, like when I went back to high school, I was in a private school, so the course load was pretty tough. And not only that, it was far from my house. So I had to be very efficient, with how I was training during that time. Because I only had X amount of hours on the court a week because of school and everything. So it's like, and then plus my dad's also a coach, so it's like he can't just tailor everything to my, my time. I have to be on his schedule too. It's like he might only have 45 minutes for me on that day, So like during that 45 minutes with him, like be very diligent of like wanting to work on a certain thing and not just go out there and just hit up the middle for 45 minutes. But
Yeah.
I think like taking ownership of your game and talking to your coaches would be like, this is exactly what I feel on the court, like during a match. And I want to, do this, or like I see that I want to do this, but I can't execute it. Like be very diligent and, take ownership on that aspect of your game and then go from there. You don't need to be on the court for 3 hours. And I think that's a big misconception because they're like, I train 3 hours every single day, but the results aren't there. But it's like, okay, what are you doing in those 3 hours? Um, so to me, that I feel like that, and like the winning and losing, like I never checked UTR. Tennis recruiting was UTR was like newer, like when I was in the juniors and getting into high school and stuff. But I didn't really like look at it. A lot of my friends looked at it and they knew like everyone's UTR off the top of their head. Same with tennis recruiting and stuff. Like to me, like, yeah, it's good to see, for development purposes and stuff, maybe to see if you're kind of trending in the right direction. But like these juniors and stuff, I just hear them talking, and some of my students, like, they obviously have goals of where they want to be, which I fully agree with. Like maybe you want to jump certain UTR points, but they're checking it every single day. And it
Mhm.
really dictates how they feel in the match of like, I'm playing a lower UTR, I'm playing a higher UTR, like he's just better than me. Like you're going to that match already thinking you're worse than the guy just because he's rated like 0.3 ahead of you. And I think that that's also another misconception is like those numbers aren't always accurate. I've seen a 10 UTR beat a, mid 12 UTR. I've seen a 12 UTR beat, almost beat a 14 UTR, beat a 14 UTR. So I think that that dictates too much of like how people approach matches, or like if you're playing a match and you're playing a guy that's like one UTR point lower than you and you're losing, it's like immediately you're like, I'm losing this match. Like, how am I losing to this guy? He's worse than me. But in fact, like maybe he's not worse than you. He just maybe he's played less than you, and he's just getting back into things. So I feel like that's also another misconception. I always tell my students like, don't check it. Don't check those things and stuff. Like just allow it to be on your timeline. Check it once in a while. Allow your parents to check it, and then don't let them tell you. And like maybe check it once a month. And then go from there.
Quick question on this. So I've also heard parents who say, "Hey, UTR, like that's what college recruit people
Yeah.
look at." So is that not true then? I mean, when you're recruiting,
To an
you're not
extent,
really.
it's true. Like we look at it, obviously we want like certain levels in a way, but at the same time, like a lot of these also countries do, like the UTR can get really skewed. So for us, like we use it as almost like a kind of like an appetizer or like a little summary to like see kind of where
Foot in
you're
the
at.
door.
Yeah, yeah, foot in the door of things, and like, and then from there we want to actually see I've seen guys that are 13 plus UTRs, and you go and watch them and you're like, what, like this guy's like 11 maybe, or like he's not like that, it's fully inflated. And it's like, okay, maybe he's a 13 UTR and you go over there and watch him and he's like a full like pusher, and like he just kind of like he just makes a million balls. Like you don't necessarily want that guy right away, because like in college you might get eaten up with the format. So it's like, yes, we do look at it, but it's more just to gauge a little bit before we like go into talking to the kid. And I use it more honestly to track results, just because everything's input into UTR. So like for me, like the UTR is a little bit for me a baseline to see players, but then at the same time, it's like it's to go and see all the results and see where they're playing each week, and go back and
Gotcha. Gotcha.
and some countries, like we know for a fact, like the German, like when we go and talk to the German kids, like nothing gets inputted for UTR. So I mean, the kid could be like a 3 UTR, but he's actually playing at like a 13 plus level. It just doesn't get inputted because of his club matches. So we know that when we go to the international kids, like we can't always look at UTR because it's like it can get so skewed sometimes.
Got it. Got
Yeah,
it. Well, cool. Um, I don't want to keep everybody too long. So, Bryce, if it's okay for you, I want to open up the floor to people to, ask any questions.
absolutely.
Um, is Jack, are you here? I'm not looking at the list, but Jack Shore, if you are, unmute yourself, and Mitchell Frank, if you are here too. feel free to unmute yourself. If not, I'm gonna open it up to anybody to, to ask question to Bryce. Yeah, so go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to if you have any questions.
I have a question. I just want to first of all say, Bryce, thank you so much for coming out and talking to us. But so you talked about a lot about like your development when you were younger. You were kind of like at this USTA or player development, and then when you got older, you started training with your dad. And so I was wondering, how would you like handle like a balance between like tennis and like outside off the court, like having like a life? Because like it sounded like you like you had to mature like really early. You probably didn't have like a normal childhood from like ever from like I don't know like 8 years old, and like
Yeah,
how would you like balance that for like when you were older but even when you were younger?
a great question. I feel like a lot of juniors go through this. I mean, in the moment, there was just like so many things that, I wasn't able to do, at a young age. Like my parents limited how much I can play video games. They limited like they wouldn't even let me ride a scooter, because they were too worried that I might, fall and hurt myself or something and that. And even like when I got to high school, like I remember like freshman year, like when you go into high school, like all I wanted to do was like, go to a dance and stuff or a school dance, ask a girl to a school dance. And like I remember I got asked to winter formal my freshman year and I had to say no because I was gonna be in Norman, Oklahoma playing a national event. And I remember like going to that event and like my mom knew right away that I was like not having it. And she just got like so mad at me. She's like, you just want to go, to this dance, but like this is setting you up for your life and like all this lecture. But I think that having that big picture mentality of what you want to do with, the tennis and where you want to take it, if it truly means that much to you, you'll sacrifice certain things because as you get older and stuff, I'm not that old, I'm only 26, but like you can't have everything. You have to, especially when you get to college. Like college really, really tests you of like your maturity of like what you got to choose, what you want to do. Because there's going to be a lot of things that are offered to you of parties, of this and that. And not saying you don't go to them, but I'm saying like you got to really pick and choose what your priorities are in your mind. For me, growing up, my priorities were academics and athletics. So yeah, it was tough to not be able to hang out with friends all the time, and I had to say no quite a bit, a lot more than I wanted to. I probably could have balanced a little better, but for me, like I had this drive in me that I wanted to be in college playing. I wanted to be a professional player, and I always reminded myself of that when I was, feeling like I wanted to, go and hang with friends and stuff. Not saying I didn't hang with friends. I'm saying that I just picked and choose when it was time. If it was like right, night before a match or stuff like that, obviously I can't do it. A couple days before maybe. But it's also like if my academics were slipping, then I would even stop my tennis to get my academics back up because that was huge for my family of like making sure I was on top of things. But yeah, I mean, it's not a, I don't think I have a right or wrong answer for you. It's just more of like, as you got to prioritize, you got to have your priorities. So we tell our guys actually this quite a bit, as when they come in as freshmen, there's a triangle and top of the triangle is tennis, academics on the right, on the left is your social life. You can be excellent at two of the three things, but you can't be good at all three. It's not possible. So for you, you have to think of that triangle at the top and think about, okay, I have to pick two things to excel at, and the third thing I can be okay at. And you have to, in your mind, you have to choose those two things. So a lot of our guys, obviously on the tennis team, they'll choose tennis and academics. And we know right away if they start to impede on the other one and their social life gets out of hand, usually shuts down, tennis goes down, and then academics go down. So they have to, we always tell them it's tough. You got to say no to going to parties and stuff. I'm not saying you can't hang out with friends, but you gotta know what your priorities are. And you gotta always stay true to those. So that's how I kind of balanced it when I was younger.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I see
I'm looking at the chat.
Michael S said, is there any off-court training you might recommend along with fitness?
Yeah, I mean,
we played a virtual game when we last met.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I still have it. I have it over here. I brought it with me to my apartment, but yeah, it was by off court training. Do you mean like what are the like expand on that? Do you mean like anything fitness wise, or is it more of just like I'm not sure because I can think like for off court training, like what we do sometimes for the guys to kind of almost trick them into having a good conditioning day is like we'll go and play ultimate frisbee, like go and do that stuff. But I mean, I think that like on court training wise is the best way to train, but obviously you can't be on the court all the time when you're training. So I think that anything like body weight wise, like making sure you're getting good at pull-ups you know, because you won't get too hurt playing doing pull-ups. All the body weight stuff, push-ups. Like I remember the doing my first pull-up at a young age and being like, oh, this is awesome. And like really diving into like that. Um, Running is great, but I like to limit the running a little bit just because like the pounding on the knees and stuff can get tough for tennis player just because there's always just so much lateral movement and stuff. But yeah, I mean, biking honestly is great and stuff like that. But when it comes to like off court training, it's like same thing. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's because everyone's body's different, you know, to how they react to things. So I think that you know doing other sports is honestly to me like great way to do it within reason. Because you know when it comes to like maybe playing basketball with friends, if you jam a finger or sprain an ankle, like it might get a little tough, you know, when it comes to being back on the court. But I think that you know doing multiple sports, you know, testing your hand and eye with those things for things outside of tennis, I think is a great way to train.
So, but the second question, what if you practice very intentionally, keep your intensity level high, and you show up at a tournament and and are super tight? If you're new to tournaments, how do you suggest you get that out of your game?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm working with a student, a junior player right now on this because he practices great with me and he looks great when he's playing. And then I went and watched him play a match, and he told me that you know he was struggling with certain things and getting nervous, and you can see like it wasn't even close to the level he plays in practice. Um, to me, like in the juniors, that when I excelled the most at not getting nervous was kind of shifting my focus in a way to something else. So instead of focusing on the actual like full tennis aspect of things in your game and like your game is like a big picture, like look at the little picture in your game, you know, of certain things like maybe have three like with the kid. I remember talking to him before the match and his next tournament he said was a lot better was like I gave him three things to focus on in the match. One of them being like first serve percentage. First serve percentage, I was like, make sure it's high. Like focus on getting all first serves in. Second thing was more of a challenge. And I did this on the court when I was playing was don't don't miss two unforced errors twice, two in a row. You can't miss two in a row. If it's the unforced error and a forced error, that's one thing. But if it's two unforced errors and it's like a mental lapse, like try to see if you can kind of minimize those gaps. And then the third thing I told him was make sure your arms moving quick and make sure your legs are staying low. And with those three things, like it kind of took his mind away from like the winning and losing and getting nervous of things and you know trying to set expectation during the match of one how he wanted to play. And I'm not saying that those three things are like a key to success because you can still get tight after that, but you got to be able that you should try to just challenge your mind to shift your focus on very specific things in your game or on the court of what you want to accomplish. And usually the nerves hopefully kind of can subside a little bit. Um, Tennis is one of those like the nerves are always going to be there. That's why we play the sport, you know. If the nerves weren't there, like you wouldn't love it, you know. Like you truly love it when you have the nerves. So I mean it's just so it's how you're going to manage it. And I think that having that, you know, small picture mentality with things is a good way to do it. So set like a three, you know, a three-part goal or whatever you want to do before a match and see if you can kind of execute that. If you lose the match, you know, and or you get tight and you still execute those three things, you can be happy with how you played that day, you know? So hopefully the same thing. There's no right or wrong answer. I mean, I was a nervous wreck on the court at times, but I think also too rituals, like having set rituals every single match, or not even match, just practice, whatever, helps you be at ease. It helps you be more comfortable. You know, I had a certain ritual of how I would, you know, wear my hat on court. how I would I had a lot of random, very superstitions, but certain things like that like make you feel a lot more comfortable when as you're like I guess like doing them. Whether your service ritual, your return ritual, how you drink your water, like it can be as specific or non-specific as that stuff, but I think those things really do help with the nerves when they start to go.
Thank you.
We have one more question or a new question. I asked earlier what you would have done differently. I meant it about that match. You were down 0-5 with all the coaches. I know it varies person to person, but how did you manage stress and pressure? How would you have managed it better?
No, honestly, in that match, I don't think I don't think I handled it great. And even throughout my junior career, I feel like I didn't handle, the nerves great. It wasn't until my last year, honestly, in college where I really, really figured it out when it came to the nerves and stuff. And to me, it was more of like a mentality of like embracing everything that was being thrown at me in the match, whether it was, how I was playing, the crowd, like certain things like that. I embraced it. And once I embraced, I remember being at the Pac-12 tournament in my last year and I'm playing in front of a pretty big crowd. And I remember taking an overhead like clean to the back fence. I remember taking, a forehand to lose the set, that first set, and I hit it out of the stadium, like out of the stands and stuff. And like instead, I feel like the old Bryce would have kind of been like, "Oh, that's bad," and like been like, "Oh, like what are these people thinking? Like, like how do they think? Like, what's going on? Like stuff like that." And I would have like my mind would have spiraled. But it was funny, like in that moment, if you watch me there, like I hit that and I kind of just like looked at my coach and kind of just like laughed, because I'm like, I can't take it back. I can't take back anything. I just accepted that that happened and I just moved on. And I think that having that acceptance, when you're playing bad and doing those things really helps doing that. So I feel like when I went down 0-5, I don't like remember vividly, but I do remember kind of just being like, well, can't get worse than this. So I kind of just did my best to kind of scrap it through. But to me, like, I don't know how many of you guys watched Ted Lasso, but I'm like a huge fan of Ted Lasso, like the show. And I think that like to me that really helped. Like there was a quote in there during that dart scene where he says, be curious, not judgmental. That was a huge quote that I followed my last year and like throughout like my time on the court. Because like to me, like being curious is like kind of accepting what's going on and being like, okay, what's gonna happen? Like what if? So I remember being down match points in my last few matches in college and like I saved 7 match points in 2 matches to win both in 3 sets. And both matches, when I was down those match points, I told myself, what if? What if I just hunker down and make a bunch of balls at this point and the guy gets tight? What if this? And like the flip side would have been like, not my day. I was being judgy with how I was playing and being like, I'm gonna lose this match. But having that like curious mindset on the court and like accepting everything and seeing what could happen felt like it helped a lot for me.
That's a
So
great advice. Yeah, being
yeah,
curious and not judgmental,
curious.
right?
Like, and I remember like that really, I'll never forget those 2 matches, those last 2 matches I played in college, like being down those match points. And like, I remember saying that to myself on the changeovers and before the match points of like, be curious here, focus here, be curious, focus, be curious. I kept like muttering, like the fans probably thought I was crazy because I was like talking to myself out loud like that. But it really like, when I did that, it felt like a weight was like off my chest. And I was like, and I could accept, if I lost that point because I at least gave myself the chance to win it. And it just happened that, those 7 match points I saved, kind of went in my favor.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for talking to us.
I see Janik has a hand up. Go for it.
Yeah. Hey Bryce, thank you again for doing this. So you've been around like a lot of high level tennis throughout your life, and I was just wondering, like, what are the characteristics and traits or habits or things people do, like the people that make big leaps in their game, like through college, through high school, after college, like what are the characteristics and traits that you notice?
There's a great question. There's a certain level of, professionalism that goes into, it can be at any level, you know. And I think that having that level, that professionalism behind you from whether you're off the court, on the court, whatever, it really shows. And you can't, lie about that. And, you know, the guys on our team that are the most professional usually have the best results. And I think that, you know, when they make those big leaps, it's because they're trusting that the process of everything, and they're still sticking. They obviously will have to shift things here and there, but they're able to, you know, problem solve better. I feel like because they trust that, you know, that mindset with things. And stuff. I mean, I'm huge on, you know, throughout the juniors, I wrote down a lot of, you know, my feelings on the court, you know, what analyzing matches and stuff. So I feel like, you know, having that to be able to look back at and see how you grow, I think is a good way. Setting certain goals, you know, have long-term and short-term goals of what you want to achieve with your tennis. It sounds very, you know, cliche and, you know, beginner thing to say, but I genuinely, if you're putting that, you know, pen to paper and you really truly believe those things and you want to reach certain, you know, you have certain aspirations, like you can always go back and look at those things. You know, for me, it was, you know, ending, you know, certain things, you know, with my game, I wanted to achieve certain fitness benchmarks I wanted to achieve and stuff. And it really, that was like the motivation that, you know, kind of got me through juniors. And I've seen it through the junior circuit. So, you know, everyone's different when it comes to their development, but I do think too what aids that the most is if you have a clear identity of how you should play as a player. If you have a clear identity of how your game should be, and it's not like a, because I've seen it many times, you know, at coaching at the collegiate level and stuff, like they'll have a false identity of how they should play. Like even the guy I mentioned, our number one player, Peter Mack. Like to me, for 2 years, when I was there, he had a false identity of how he should play. So he was kind of like he thought that he could just blast forehands past guys, and that's how he used to play. I'm like, Pete, that's like completely wrong of what you should think. And he's like, why? He's like, I have a great forehand. I'm like, yeah, Pete, but like look at everything else in your game. Like you're built, like you have massive legs, you move around the court like no one else, like you glide around the court, you can strike the ball, like your timing is unbelievable. Like you don't need to blow guys off the court. Like all you got to do is like suffocate the guy on the court, honestly, like hold the baseline and just like turn this into an absolute like battle, like toe to toe. And then he was like, oh, I guess so. And when he started doing that, like he would get guys to tap out of matches like left and right. But it started too, like he was trying to train as if he was, you know, blasting forehands, like serves and everything. I'm like, that's not your game, man. Like you got to know your identity as a player. And then you can kind of develop that, you know, that routine, the development, you know, off the court of your body and stuff. And then you go from there. But yeah, having that professionalism, I think to me is like, that's like, you can't teach that. And that's like, that's something that comes from the junior, the player, it comes from within that you want to, you know, do that. Cause at the end of the day, like my parents always told me, it is a job and it's a day job. And whether you think of it or not, and you're traveling and playing these events. So, you know, that dictates a lot of your life.
Thank you, Bryce. Val, you wanna do
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah. Thank you for joining and doing this, Bryce. I do have a question. Based on your experience as a junior, and you touched base on this a little bit. And the reason I asked is just to give you some context. I have an 11-year-old son who who started playing when he was 6. But over the years, I look at him. I'm like, man, he's not really natural at anything, right? He's not a natural runner. He doesn't have natural balance. Sometimes when
Yeah.
people go into a volley, they put the other hand offhand back to counterbalance and everything. But one of the things he does is he tries really hard, right?
Yeah.
But one of the questions I have is, he's having trouble keeping up with in his age group, right? Being 11, when he was 10, he had issues, winning, losing, he wasn't dominating, the 10 and under. But what you did mention in your story was that you played up a lot, right? And I see a lot of parents putting their children playing up a lot, and they end up losing, right? What are your thoughts behind that? Is that something? Do they do that just to kind of see what the level is out there, and that's what they strive to be, or is it they're it's like a litmus test where they're trying to compare themselves with other kids within a couple years older than them, see what they need to strive for, right? So what are your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, it's
Playing up, yeah.
I mean, I can't answer for the parents, you know, because I don't know what their intentions are behind that. I mean, it could be either of those things. Like that's a very probable, you know, thing that could happen. But like playing up and playing in your division, it's how you do it, you know. And we just had this talk with one of our commits that's coming to SC, because he was only playing things that were like, it was a little harsh the way he put it, but it was like that didn't really matter, you know. And then in that, and like I'll give you context, like he, instead of playing a junior sectional event where, you know, where he can play all of his peers and play everyone his age, he would go and play, you know, the men's opens, the UTR Pro Series, like those things. And we told him, like, yes, it's good to sprinkle those in, but at the same time, and I think Agassi, his dad, I think they talked about this. I'm not sure it was in the book or if I heard it in like a podcast or something, but learning to play in your division and dominating your division is just as important, in my opinion. And because if you're getting to that top of your division, you have this target on your back. So it's like, instead of playing with like, how feel like I always, we talk to our guys, like playing with house money, like when you're playing in these, playing up and playing a division, like you're like, oh, I'm playing up, you know, I can just swing loose, swing free, whatever. What are you gonna do when you're the guy getting hunted, you know? And that, and then to me, like, they're finding that balance between the two of playing up and down is very crucial, especially at a young age, of learning to like play people your age. And so you can kind of get that, you know, that competitiveness with them. And then you kind of feel like the match matters a little more because you're playing someone, you know, in your division, in your section, stuff like that. And, you know, we told one of our freshmen this year before he came in, like, go and do that. You know, go and be uncomfortable, be the top dog, and have everyone gunning for you. And he did an unbelievable job with that. I mean, he kind of ran away with it and proved to himself that he was the best, you know, junior out of Southern California, at that, for that class. So I think that, you know, to answer your question, I think that there's no right or wrong way, but I think that you have to have a good balance between the two. At a young age, I believe that you should probably play, especially for the guys' side, play more in your division, just to, you know, just because of the jumps in physical, you know, maturity and stuff throughout the other, you know, 14, 16s, 18s. But then, as I feel like, at least for your first year, your second year, when you're like 12, let's say your kid's 12 and he's playing, you know, in the 12 matches, like play the bigger events in your division, and then play, you know, sprinkle in some of the lower level events, in where you can get into the upper divisions. And I found that when I did that with my young player, when I first started with him, I feel like that was a good balance for him, because he got like the balance of playing with his peers, getting those nerves, and then having the freedom to go play, you know, a college kid or some random college kid that was playing the men's open. So you got to find that balance of in their schedule.
Thank you, Bryce. Hey, Tim, while we're, you know, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So Tim is our operations manager, one of our best trainers. Um, he's gonna put Bryce's contact information on the chat, and Bryce okayed for us to post his cell phone number and his email. So if we end and if we still have any more questions, feel free to reach out to Bryce. He also do um tennis lessons. I know you guys are not in California, so but he can thank you, Tim. All right, any
Reach
other
out.
questions?
There was one here in the chat. There's
Oh,
someone.
yes. Let's see that.
What are some of your goals, short term and long term, as a junior? What made you decide to set those? Yeah, I mean, juniors, my goals were, you know, long term goal was college. Um, that was more, I feel like, later, like at a young age, you obviously want to go pro, and stuff like that. And I felt like I was a little bit, you know, blind to that. I thought that, you know, my level was high enough that I didn't have to go to college and play. I can just go pro right away. Because at like a young age, you know, I played some of the guys that were number one in the country for college, and even though I was losing to them, it was close matches. I was losing, you know, 5-5, 4-5. So I felt like, you know, college was not a step down, but it was always there. But at a young age, I wanted to just go play pro right away. As I got older, you kind of get a little more humbled and stuff, and you're like, okay, the level in college is great. Like, I want to go to college. Um, for me, I wanted to go to a top. That was a long-term goal. I want to be a top 5 school that I wanted to go to. And at the time, I was talking to 3 of them. and ended up at UCLA. And that I had an unbelievable experience there playing for Billy Martin and Grand Chen for that year, and being able to represent those 4 letters on my chest. Short-term goals each year were always kind of like making deep runs at some of the top events, like qualifying and playing KZU. I don't know if I played 5 years or 4 years of KZU, but like to me that was always a pretty small yet large goal, because I wanted to make some runs there. I think now I feel like for junior tennis it's shifted a lot, because the the top players now all play international. They all play on the ITF tour, which like the ITF tour wasn't really a thing, really. Like it wasn't crazy popular when I was growing up and in the juniors and your guys' age. It was like the SoCal section was so strong that like if you weren't good enough to play in SoCal, either you went and played the ITFs. So for me, it was always like, short-term goals, staying on top of the SoCal, events, and dominating them as much as I can, and being one of the top 10 guys. And then yeah, qualifying for KZU, and trying to make deep runs at some of these super nationals. But yeah, I mean those were kind of my major, tennis goals. Fitness goals too. I didn't want to lose. I cramped a lot in the juniors. I'm not sure if it was cramps because of nerves or if it was because of fitness. And I always thought it was fitness, but I think later on thinking about it, I think it was more nerves. But for me, it was just like I didn't want to lose a match because of a variable that I can control. So that for me, like fitness goal wise, that was a huge one for me. So I really took fitness and nutrition like pretty seriously at a young age, and throughout high school and everything. It's funny talking to some of my classmates and stuff in high school. They they told me later on, they were like, "Man, you were really intimidating in high school." I was like, "Really?" Like they're like, "Yeah, like," because I used to go, and my dad was a high school coach at the time too. And I used to just go to the courts to, during lunch, instead of like hanging with friends and stuff on some days, I just go to the courts and get work done with my dad, or go on a run on the track and stuff. And they would always see me doing that. So a lot of them were pretty intimidated, apparently, I guess. But I had pretty like strong, aspirations to go to a top college. And that was all that was on my mind at the time. It was just like, I gotta get there, I gotta get there and stuff. And I always had this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that it wasn't good enough. So that I used that little voice in the back of my head to kind of really drive me, in every aspect of like, I really got to push myself every single day, of what I can kind of squeeze out of myself to be the best version of myself.
Now that you're on the coaching side, do you feel like you enjoy tennis more, enjoy tennis less?
I I miss it a lot, especially competing. I mean, coming off the last year, I had a UCLA. I lost one singles match, and my competitive juices are as strong as ever. So, it crosses my mind that I want to, maybe try and play a little more. I never really gave it a full chance, because during that time I was after I graduated, I went and trained, and I was supposed to go travel and play. But then the guy I was going to travel and play with, he got picked up to be a hitting partner for Jensen Brooksby. So I
I
didn't get
remember
to,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't get to travel with him. And at the same time, when I was entering these futures events, like my mind wasn't really fully in it, because I was interviewing for a job with Nike. So coaching was never on my radar at all. I just the Nike went on a hiring freeze. They told me I was getting the job and I was going to move to Beaverton, and then they went on a hiring freeze. And till this day, I've never heard back from them. So I don't know if the hiring freeze is still going on, or what. But yeah, I mean, I got lucky enough to land the job at SC, and I'm fortunate that I can still play with the guys. I'm not as fit as I used to be by anywhere close to that, but ball striking wise, I'm probably better than ever, just because of how much I hit every day. And yeah, I miss everything about the competitiveness, the sweat and tears in the court, the training, the tough days. I miss all of it. Like that, like looking back at
It's
it, like, it's the best part.
amazing because I mean I do see a lot of players who are burnt out after college, right? So for you to go through such hard, challenging early tennis careers and still want to play, but you're still super young. I mean, look at Karue or
Yeah,
Carousel,
yeah. Peru is like
right?
he's killing it, and I want to talk to him about it too, because like the tough part is like it's just such a what they're doing with the professional tour right now, like those like entry level events, like you lose so much money. Like they got to do something about like the money, because like there's so many players just that can't afford to travel from country to country, and like even if you're winning the event, like you're losing money that week. Like it's just tough. So it's a tough lifestyle, but like yeah, I mean I feel like initially when I finished college, I felt maybe a little burnt out with my training, kind of how hard I did with everything and how, into it I was. But looking back at it, like now, I'm just like, I miss everything. Like I miss the daily grind. I miss the bad days of, wanting to break every racket in my bag. But like those are, looking back at it, those are like the best. It's like the best time of your life.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Eaton's got a question right here. Have you ever had a match losses that you thought you played so bad and you would just want to walk off the court not knowing what happened? How do you deal with those losses
I've had
and how do you recover?
many, many, many matches like that. And I'm not saying you're not going to have those matches. You're going to have those matches more often than you think. But I think like at a younger age, I didn't deal with those times, the greatest always. I had some, bad losses. And sometimes you just got to give it to the opponent and be like, you're just too good, that day. Um, I mean, the thing that I would always think about in those moments in the juniors, I really looked up to when I was at that USA Training Center. We got pretty close with a decent amount of the top American players at the time. So Andy Roddick, he was still playing at that time, and he was a person I looked up to a lot, and seeing him and his work ethic with everything. But I mean, he always talked about he had a quote that was, "You're only as good as your last result." Um, and that's kind of like in those moments when I would have those like really, really tough matches where like the level was terrible from my side, the mental was bad from my side. Like those days, like I would think about that quote, quite a bit and be like, okay, my last result was this. Okay, how am I gonna kind of bounce back from that? And that's like the greatest to me, one of the greatest parts about tennis. Like there's always another match. It's not like it's not like a one and done because you lost this match. Like it's not like your career is over. I mean, we gave this talk to our guys this past year. We wrote a question on a board in our locker room, and we said Marcos Giron had the greatest year of his life, greatest season of his life. Like top, I think he made top 50 in the world, made top 60 in the world. And, it's the best season he's had since he's been on the ATP tour. And guess what his record was? He won one more match than he lost. He was like 29 and 28 or something like that. Because all of our guys, we told them, we said, hey, write what you think. Don't look it up. Write what you think his record was at the end of 2024. And he had won one more match. All the guys wrote like, 30 and 20, 50 and 14, like just ran like crazy, like discrepancies between the wins and losses. He won a singular match more than he lost. And he had the best season of his career. And it's to me like to being able to lose. I mean, that's the thing about tennis is one winner every tournament, and you lose more than you win sometimes, and you can still be top 100 in the world. So it's kind of being okay with the losses and stuff. And if you have a bad day, that day, sometimes you just gotta be like kind of suck it up and be like, hey, not my day, really not my day, but tomorrow's a new day. So I'd like try to. We always tell our guys like tennis doesn't fully isn't your life. Obviously it is. It feels like that, but don't let it define you. And if you have a bad loss, don't let it affect, the rest of your day and having the worst day of your life. Like feel that pain of the loss right after and then move on because it's at this point it's just a chapter in your life and you won't be able to play professional or do everything forever.
Oh. We'll take maybe one more question and then we've been on for 90 minutes, so
Wow.
we won't keep you guys any longer. Any one last question? Tim can select one or you can just shout out.
I have like one last question, a small one.
Go for it, Mary.
So you talked about how like the best players are really good like problem solvers and like they can like break down their opponents. And you talked also about how like watching a lot of tennis is good. Are there other ways besides obviously like playing matches that you would recommend like we could like become better problem solvers like on court, off the court, and stuff like that?
I'm huge on, I think I said it earlier, like other sports. I think that seeing, playing other sports, whether it's a physical thing of like, soccer, basketball, those things. Or, honestly, like I always tell my guys that like love it, like chess. Like chess is like the best, it's the best way to me to figure out the game of tennis. Because it's like I always tell my kids like that, especially those who play, like the whole time when you're playing chess, you're trying to look for the opening in your opponent's strategy and what they're trying to do, read into it, and then try to checkmate them. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it takes like you're trying to plan ahead and you go like one piece and then he counters one piece. Oh, you have an opening. Ah, I didn't get there. You know, it's like that. To me, that's exactly how tennis is played. Like you're trying to kind of sacrifice certain things in your game maybe to open up, you know, something in their game. You have to do this. Sometimes you have to take the loss over here to win over there. So it's like it's such a give and take game. And it's a very like critical thinking game when it comes to like thinking, you know, 2, 3, 4 moves ahead. And everyone has their own style of how they play chess. So to me, like I'm not like I'm not great at chess. I can play, but like some of my teammates, like when we're on the road, like they would have that chess.com app and just like grind and play for hours against each other. And they were really good. But like to me, like that's a good way to that's not, you know, anything athletic to kind of further your mind, at least for when it comes to the court. Because if you the more you can think about the court like a chessboard in my eyes, like the more you can kind of figure out, you know, the different ways to open up the court in this way to, you know, play against this type of player, to play, you know, whatever, and problem solve that way. And to me, like just other sports, like playing other sports makes you see things differently, you know, see how the body moves, see how this moves. Like I played basketball, baseball, and soccer growing up at a young age. That my dad put me in all those sports just for tennis, you know, hand eye and all those things. And that really kind of honed in. Like he had a plan, and I didn't know about it. I loved, you know, soccer. I excelled at. I felt like in all of those and loved all of them. Tennis was actually the one that I probably liked the least at that age, but uh, but I think once I got older, I did appreciate a lot more. But yeah, I think that playing other sports is huge when it comes to kind of developing things if you have time. You know, not saying it has to be like a major thing that you play a bunch of sports, but like every once in a while, you know, go and shoot some hoops, you know, by yourself or whatever, or you know, go and play soccer with some friends or volleyball, whatnot, you know, appreciate the other sports and how the body moves.
So you get along with your dad pretty well still?
My dad, yeah, we I feel like at a young age we didn't see eye to eye all the time. I think that taking, you know, the parent figure and the coach aspect of things, like it was too blended together at times. And not from just his end, but my end too, you know, being a son and a student of his. So as I got older and I matured more, like I sat down with him and we were just like, hey, like if I do want to start still work with you, but we have to differentiate, you know, the father and the son relationship and the player, you know, son relationship. So we set, you know, ground rules of certain things. Like my dad actually didn't watch me play a ton of tennis. Like when it came to tournaments, he never watched me play tournaments. He was always working. The only tournament he ever took me to was Kalamazoo. That was the only event. So during that event, we told him, like I talked to him, and was like, don't talk tennis with me at dinner unless I bring it up, like certain things like that, you know, obviously within reason. And and then he said, and then he goes, I don't want to ramble on. And he's like, I want to right after the match. He's like, all I ask is right after the match that we talk for like 10, 15 minutes about your match, because that's when it's the freshest. And that was when I was doing better in the juniors when we had that, you know, system. And then throughout college, like I didn't work with my dad a ton unless it was in the summers, like when I was at UCLA. And those early years at UCLA, like my tennis was like not great. Like I was just playing doubles. My singles was the worst it's ever been. I couldn't figure out why. I really actually honestly really hated tennis during some of those years, like especially those middle years. My first year at UCLA was the best year. We were top 2 in the country and we had a great year and I had a great team that, you know, good guys and it was super close with. And then those early years, I'll admit it, like were not good years for me tennis wise, especially mentally tennis wise. Like I was too tough on myself. I was not playing well. It's like what I told you, like tennis dictated my life too much of how I was emotionally. And then it wasn't until COVID hit was when my tennis got the worst. And then COVID hit and I went home. I moved back home after that was my junior year in college when COVID hit. So I moved back home in that March and I went out and practiced one day with my dad and I couldn't figure out what was going on with my forehand. And I almost broke every racket in my tennis bag. And I told my dad I'm not going back to UCLA. I said, I'll go get my degree at UCLA and finish out. I said, I'm not going to play any more tennis. And the weird thing was, like in that moment, like I was like super emotional during it. And the weird thing was, my dad just goes, okay. Like it didn't like there was no like pushback, no like trying to convince me to like, want to go and play. He was like, okay, like if you feel that, just, we'll be supportive of it and we'll move on. So I didn't touch a racket for a couple like that week, the rest of that week. And then COVID was like that was like when it was like lockdown. And
Yeah.
I live close to two of these tennis courts like at the time, like my parents' house. So my dad goes, "Hey, like I can't coach right now. I don't want to go running or anything. Like, will you just come to the courts with me and just hit?" He's like, "Just for my fitness, like just to get me to be fit again." I was like, "Okay, fine." And I was like, I just did it for him. And I don't know if my dad meant to do this, but I think deep down, he probably knew that I would figure things out slowly. But every day, my dad always growing up wanted to hit early in the morning. So I went out there at 6 a.m. every single day with him to help him get a workout in of hitting on the court. And slowly he started intertwining the coach aspect back into things because no one knows my game better than him. And I figured some things out in my game and then in that moment, I remember like 2 weeks into it, I remember thinking to myself, like, this is why I play tennis. Like I play tennis because of him. And like his love for me, like on the court, and his love like working with me, like his eyes like glistened like when we would talk tennis on the court and like problem solve things and then it would click. So in that moment, I'm like, oh, this is why I play tennis, like for him, because it's our thing. And that's when my tennis, like that year, like my tennis absolutely took off. Like I had this, like it felt like I was a full new player. And like those last two matches at UCLA, like the first match was against we were playing University of Utah. I lost one match that entire year, and it was to the kid that I was playing. I lost to him 5 days before in Utah. I lost 4-3, I think, or 4-4. And we slotted to play them 5 days later in Ojai at the Pac-12 event. And this was also a match where if we lost, our season was over. So I go and play. One, I'm highly motivated to beat this kid because I had lost. He was my only loss that entire season. And I go and play him, and I win a tough first set, 7-6. I win the first game of the second, and I go down to lose the second 6-1, and I go down 3-0 in the third. Just getting absolutely worked by this kid. And my dad was there with his high school team at Ojai during the high school event. And he calls my sister because there's no live stream, there's only live scoring. And he calls my sister and goes, "Hey, what's Bryce's score?" She goes, "Down 0-3 in the third." He goes, "Should I even watch?" And she goes, "What do you mean? It could be his last college match ever. Go watch him." So my dad speeds over to the site. He gets there at 1-4 when I'm sitting on the changeover. And I got Billy Martin, the head coach, standing in front of me, not saying a word to me because at that moment he doesn't even know what to say to me. I have a towel on my head. I'm like looking up at the ceiling, at the sky. And then I just hear my dad's voice. And immediately I look forward and I take the towel off my head and I'm looking right at my dad. And he's like yelling, he's like looking at me, he's pumping his fist, and he's nodding his head. He's like, "You can do this, like you got this." And I start kind of nodding my head. I'm like, "Okay, fine. Like, let me snap out of it, like deep breath. All right, I got this." And I went out there and like I don't even know what possessed me. And my dad went crazy on the sidelines. Like he followed me left and right, like jumping up and down, yelling, and being like, because he's like my coach as well, he can just say one word to me and it means like an entire like paragraph in my head. So it's like code words a little bit. So my dad starts telling me certain things. He says cage, which is like a strategy that him and I developed on the court. He tells me like core. He's telling me all these things and everything starts clicking in my head. And all of a sudden I come out and I save 3 or 4 match points and I end up winning 7-6 in the third. And that won us the match because our number one guy was down a break in the third. So if we lost that match, we're done for the season. And I ended up winning that match for the team. And it was like crazy. I ran out after the match after my teammates like tackled me. I ran over to the spectators and my dad was like talking to people. And then like he gave me a huge hug and stuff. And it was a really cool experience to have him there for that. And then next day, same thing happened. But he was there for the whole match. And I ended up winning 6-3 in the third, saving 3 match points. But same thing, he was just like yelling at me the whole time, like pumping me up. But I honestly don't think I would have won those matches like without him at all. So,
Amazing.
yeah.
Well, so for you guys out there listening to this, if you guys are struggling with your tennis games, it's all normal. If the D1 top players can struggle this much, even during the season, it's just a normal thing. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, Bryce. I mean, it's been amazing, and we'll watch you, coach at USC And then maybe one day you'll do ITF or some of these events, and we can
Yeah.
stream and watch you on
That's
TV.
it.
I think Rowan and I watched you doing doubles sometime.
Yeah. We won that doubles
Yeah.
match, me and Riley. Then we got absolutely destroyed the next round. But it was, I mean, I do miss competing and having that feeling out there in the court a lot.
Well, and if you guys want to touch base with Bryce, you have his contact information. So thank you so much, Bryce.
Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much, Bryce.
For coming
Thank
out.
you.
Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bryce.
Thank you,
All right,
Bryce.
thank
All right,
you.
thank you.